Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, lovers, haters, boys, girls, and vibrations. How is everybody this afternoon? I hope everybody's well. Love and light to everyone. Now, this is my last video on prison. I wasn't going to make another, but I thought before I close the chapter, on this particular topic, I thought I'd make a video talking about the drugs in prison. How easy they are to get hold of, how they're everywhere, and how they're so expensive. Now, my first night in prison, I never had any drugs. But my pad mate was on the Brown, and he that was his surname as well. And at first time I'd seen or even heard of people flushing lines. So, for anybody that doesn't know, what happens is he was shouting on a lad who had the Brown, about 3 or 4 pads down, and he'd got the phone call to say that the money was in, because it's all done on transfers. Sometimes you get people gnashing about being your Joey and being people's mug, cleaning pads and that for tiny bits of gear and that. But usually it's done on transfers. You'll get an outside party to transfer the money into their bank. They'll get a phone call or they'll check that the money's gone in. Then you get your gear. So anyways, he was shouting on this lad about 3 or 4 pads down. For the previous half an hour or something, I'd watch him ripping a bedsheet up into strips and making like a line, tying all the knots together. This thing is about 25 foot long, if not longer. And he's shouted on the lad about 3 or 4 pads down, flush. So the lad done it, he feeds it down his end, and they flush it at the same time. And that lad at that end lets it go down the system. Well, the lad in my pad kept hold of the very end, flushed all the rest down into the system. What happens is the lines get tangled up together, and then he pulls it out, and hey presto, he pulled out about 40 or 50 foot of line, and there was a little wrap on the end. Couldn't believe my eyes. I thought it was genius. So I thought he's the man to speak to about getting my drugs of choice. So I had a word with him. He told us who to speak to. Next morning at breakfast, I had a word with them. Said, I need bother. I had some money on my phone, got the digits, got the money transferred. I got some resin and some Valium on my second day. And that was me. I was happy. A happy addict who'd scored his drugs. But I spent thousands and thousands of pounds in them first 11 weeks when I was on remand on Valium, Xanax, green when it come on. The green, the skunk was sort of few and far between. It didn't come on that much, but there was plenty of resin on. Put on Subutex, Spice, and I usually went on to the latter two when I couldn't get the drugs of my choice, because as an addict, I wasn't willing to go behind the door for 16 hours locked up. And it's more than that when you first get on, because you haven't got a job. 16 hours when you've got a job, and it's a long time to be locked in your pad on a straight head. So, I spent my entire bang up off my nut every night from there on in, and spent a small fortune. You got to remember the markup on drugs is 10 times the street price. So a gram of green is worth 100 quid. Valium can be 15, 20 quid each. So you spend a lot of money to keep your habit. Parcels come in all different kind of ways. I'm not going to disclose any of them ways, because the lads are probably still getting stuff in them ways. Some of the ways are genius. Some of the ways, you think, wow, that's clever, but you've got to remember, cons have got a lot of time on their hands. They've got a lot more time to think. The screws go home after 8-hour shifts or whatever, go home to the families. Cons are just on it all the time, thinking of new, ingenious ways, intricate systems, on getting drugs in. One way I will disclose is you'd be surprised how many screws bring it in. A lot of screws are on the payroll. Got to remember there's an enormous amount of money being made from drugs in prison. No one that can afford to pay screws large amounts of money, to bring parcels in, and they do. A lot of people go to jail purely to sell drugs, because the money that they make is astronomical. You know, you see people making literally hundreds of thousands of pounds selling drugs in there. You know, it's a big market because everyone's at it. What's sad is you see a lot of people going in prison without a drugs habit and they come out with one because, you know, they end up getting into a drug or whatever of any type, and they'll tell you, you know, it's just a jail thing. It's just a jail thing. But then, you know, a drug habit's hard to kick, and they end up taking that habit away with them out on the street, which usually leads to more crime, you know, and them being back in prison before long. You know, it's a cruel system. But drugs are everywhere. You know, green I found, you know, was only come on now and then, probably because it was so smelly and that, you know, it was quite a difficult one to get hold of. You could get it now and then. But the body scanners come in, you know, these airport type body scanners come in after about 4 weeks. So after that first 4 week, you know, the parcel sizes went down. They were coming in different ways, but they weren't coming in through the prison pocket anymore, through reception. You know, they were coming in various other ways. The prices went up, you know, and the deals went down. But, you know, it didn't deter me, you know, from spending small fortunes. You know, I burned up my own money fairly quick that I had in the bank. I had my bird and my mum and, you know, various other friends and family members giving us money every week. Well, all that was going on drugs. You know, I did get into a little bit of debt, but I got them squared up because you sharp realise, you know, you don't want to be in debt in prison. You know, someone will cut your ear off or, you know, slash your face to ribbons for a 50 quid card of spice, you know, and you can get anybody done in for 50 notes, because you'd be surprised some of these desperate lads what they will do for a card of spice. You know, so it becomes apparent very quickly, you know, that you don't want to be in debt, because people just love to make an example of you. You know, they love to show you how easy it is, you know, to get things done, and it is very easy to take a hit out on someone, and very cheap. So, you know, my habit continued. When I come out, I went back into Durham, obviously, habit, still flat out. Then I went to Kirkham, only scored a few pre-gabs at Kirkham because I was only there 24 hours. Then to Preston. Preston jail was rife. They didn't have a body scanner there, and there was everything on there, you know, and loads of different lads grafting, all making a fortune. There was every drug under the sun you could get in Preston, you know, so I picked up my drugs of choice on a daily basis. And, you know, it's surprising how many people you see in there, they're just like death, you know, and I had that addict mentality, didn't I? I'm like, I'm not as bad as them, you know, I'm not as bad as them lot over there. I'm all right, I only take this, that and the other. But, you know, drugs, the harder drugs, spice was a bad one for me. You know, that sharp took a grip of us, especially when I landed in the farms after Preston, because, you know, there wasn't any pass. There's always spice in every jail all the time. From what I've seen, spice is there all the time. But you know, other drugs, you have to be waiting on parcels a lot of the time. So when you're waiting, what do? You go on something that's there, you know, and you swap one addiction for another. And you know, developed myself a bit of a habit with the spizzle. It was the paper and the fish. It was power, you know, and that stuff, that spizzle, takes you to hell. That stuff takes you to hell. What an awful, awful drug, a horrendous drug. And that first time round in Durham, there was about 3 people dying every week. Literally 3 people dying every week off that spizzle, just dropping dead, smoking too much of it, and the hearts would just stop, they just die there and then they're landing. Seen 3 people die a week, and you don't hear that much. You know, that's the sort of thing that should be in the national news, because every time you go on the kiosk, it's death in custody, death in custody, death in custody, and that's just one jail. You know, just imagine how many lads are dying in the system that, as a whole, every week. The figures will be staggering. You know, but you don't hear anyone saying that, do you? You know, jails are sort of deemed by the media as relatively safe. Well, they're not. They're not safe at all. But what's crackers is, you know, when the spizzle kills someone, because there's usually different types of the, you know, of the spiz. When it kills someone, all the lads are like, I want the one that killed him. I want the one that killed him yesterday. You you know, that's the one that they want to be smoking. It's bizarre, absolutely bizarre. But when I ended up in the farms, I got myself a bit of a spizz habit, you know, and started off with micro doses, and your tolerance goes up, you know, more and more. Couldn't go behind my dog without a bit. And I remember thinking, oh, I better sort myself out a little bit here. I'm out in a few days. You know, I better just try and wind this down a little bit. But it didn't matter because, you know, as soon as I got out, my feet hit the floor running. I was right back on, you know, my drugs of choice. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about drugs in prison, how expensive they are, how easy they are to get hold of, you know, and how cheap it is to, you know, to get a hip put on you. You know, someone will carve you up for 50 notes, not a problem, and they'll do a proper job on you as well. You know, yeah, thanks for listening. I'm going to wrap that particular topic up. I don't think I'll be talking about prison no more in any videos. You know, I've got a couple of different topics. You know, I've got a bit of a drug experience I want to talk about, and maybe make that video tomorrow. But thanks everybody for listening. Have a lovely Thursday. Bye-bye for now, people. Big love.